Literally in this video, we'll be looking at how to answer the Igcse Global Perspective 15 mark question. So basically, we'll be looking at Igcse. This is a global perspective, the first global perspective video I'm ever doing. So global perspective video on how to answer the 15 mark question, which is question number 3. I think question number 3D. Now I'm doing this video because I have students and they are really having issues with answering the 15 mark and 24 mark questions. So I'll just do a video that will help to guide them on the necessary skills that's involved to make it look very easy. So first, there are certain keywords you have to know. These keywords will actually enable you to answer the 3A, B, and C. Very important. It just has to do with identification and giving reasons why what is there. So the major keywords here is fact. So a fact is a verifiable piece of information. So an information that you can verify. You can verify it is actually a fact. Then an opinion is a view or judgment formed about something. So your view, the judgment you make about something, it is not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. So it's just an opinion. Then value judgment. Students normally are very confused between opinion and value judgment. So value judgment is a special kind of opinion. It's a type of opinion, but it's an assessment on the rightness or wrongness of something. So it is usually defined as a view or belief about what is important, what is ethical, what is moral, what is right, and what is wrong. So a claim is a form of assertion that something is true. It's a claim. It can be based on fact or cannot be based off fact. Now, another thing is prediction. Prediction is an attempt to foresee or say what will happen in the future. Now, so an anecdote. Sorry with my pronunciation. I don't really know how to go about that. But what it means is it's a short and often a personal or humorous story or account of real event. So usually I prefer using the word personal account of real event. So here we, in question 3, which is the 15 mark question, what you'll be asked is which argument is more convincing. So that's why I titled this lesson Evaluating Argument. Evaluating argument. So which argument is more convincing? So what you should be looking at here is two people are arguing about the same topic and you are the judge. So how will you tell who is the winner of that argument? So you should have that mindset first. So the question normally come in this format, and I'll be using this throughout this past paper throughout the course of explanation. Now they said, which argument is more convincing between Brigetta's and Davos statement? We'll look at the arguments soon. Now your answer should consider both arguments. So your answer should always, when answering this question, look at both argument. So you look at that of Brigetta and you also look at that of Davos. Now, and you should support your point of view with their words, not yours. Now, when you want to answer or look at evaluating argument, they said you should consider these 3 things. I actually broke them down into 5. Now, you should look at the strength of their reasoning. So the basic thing here is the reasoning and the evidence. So this is 1, 2. Now, you should look at their use of language. 3. Then the different types of information used. 4. Then I also look at their source of bias and if it is acceptable. Now, so if you look at this, I try to break it down into this basic 5 acronym, which I call the RIBLA. Now, R here simply means the reasoning. So you look at the reasoning. You look at the evidence from their statement. So the evidence, your type of information falls is part of the evidence. The type and the source of the information is part of the evidence. So you look at their sources of bias. What are the sources of bias? Are they looking at local, economical, political, national interest? Those are the sources of bias. Then you look at their use of language. You look at the tone of the language and the clarity of the language. Then you look at the acceptability. Is it which is now acceptable? Now, when writing the acceptability, you do that when you're writing your conclusion after you've looked at the both argument using those other criteria. So let me explain these criteria further. Now, when you look at the strength of their reasoning, what are you looking at? From their statement, is it logical? Now, a logical statement is a statement that the statement offered as evidence, logical supports the conclusion. So how is the evidence related to the topic they are looking at? That you'll be able to tell me if their statement is actually logical. You look at the structure. The argument, does it have a clear and coherent flow with premises leading to logically supported what? Conclusion. That's the structure. Is it coherent? Does it have a smooth flow? Does it follow a unique pattern? Then you look at balance. That do they consider opposing viewpoint? Is there a counter argument? If it is not, if there is none, then it is a weakness. So as a result, it affects the reasoning. So their reasoning should look at opposing point of views. They should look at different viewpoint. So at that point, that is when they look at the different interests. Then claim are the central assertion. So they are the central point of the argument. So you should be able to identify their individual claims. And in IGCSE Global Perspective, these claims are usually in the first statement that both of them make about that particular topic. Then the next thing is you look at the evidence provided. Now, you see, when I say the evidence is the types of information that was used. So you look at the range of information and the depth of that information. Now, it's important to draw from diverse sources. Did this particular candidate, does that person look at just only a single source? Or does it look at different source of information? Now, from the information used, you'll be able to tell which one is local, which one is national, which one is global. We're going to look at that shortly. Now, does it the source, does it avoid any form of bias in the source and provide detailed information about the topic? So if it provides detailed information about the topic, that is what the depth is all about. If it provides detailed information, that is the depth. Then the range is the different diverse source that was being used. Then how relevant is it? You give evidence, but is the evidence related to the topic? Now, is it sufficient enough? So you look at adequate amount of data. Is the data given in that particular argument by the candidate enough, and is it compelling for it to become reliable? Is it reliable? If not, it's a weakness. Then you look at the sources of information used. Did they look at the internet? Did they look at medias? Did they look at international organizations? And so we look at that. Then the date. How recent is this information? Now, if it is good, if it is not, then it's a weakness. So you will not accept a data that you don't know the date. It reduces the reliability. It reduces reliability, and if it reduces reliability, you begin to doubt the set of data being presented. Then the different types of information. Did he look at facts? Did he look at opinions? Did he look at value judgment? Did he look at anecdote? You need to know these things. These are the different types of information. You look at facts. Are there statistics? Look at statistics. Is it available, and if it's available, is it sufficient or not? Then personal experience or testimony. So these are the evidence you are looking at from their statement. So next is their use of language. Use of language is broken down into two. You look at their tone and you look at the clarity of their language. Now, the tone can either be an emotive tone. What does it mean to have an emotive tone? An emotive tone is when the emotive language is used to evoke emotions or feelings in the audience. So when you read it and you become emotional about his description, then it's an emotive tone. You should be able to identify that. Is it exaggerated tone in the write-up? So if it's exaggerated language, it involves using hyperboles or extreme description to emphasize a point. It makes it exaggerated. Now, precise is when a precise tone involves using language that is clear, specific, and free of unnecessary embellishment. So it's just clear, straight to the point. It's specific. You don't need to come and stress yourself to try and find out what is the meaning of that statement. You see, so clarity, which is the second part. So clarity in language means using words and expression that are easily understandable by the intended audience. So you don't come and begin to speak things that we don't really get what you're saying. Then next is the sources of bias. You should always, and in fact, it's not always, it's a must for you to get the 15 mark. You should be able to identify sources of bias. What is the vested interest? What is making that particular individual make such statement? Is the sources of their bias, is their value judgment, is their interest. Now, when discussing sources of bias, is either you look at local, economical, personal, political bias. Local bias occur when individual organizations favor or prioritize a particular outcome or decision because of their belief and their specific geographical area or their community or their background. You get it? Then when you look at economic bias arises when individual, organizations, or entities are influenced by financial consideration. That's what it means. Then when you look at personal values, occur when individuals allow their own morals or ethical belief to influence their decision or position about a particular claim or a particular matter. Then political bias occur when individuals show partiality towards a particular political ideology, party, or a particular political viewpoint. So you try to look at all these in that statement. So we're going to analyze it, and I'm going to tell you the basic skill involved. Then lastly, to get your last mark, is the acceptability of their values to others. So how likely will other people agree with their perspective, view, likely consequences of the ideas presented? So that will tell you the acceptability. So you bring the acceptability in, you write about it when you're writing your conclusion, and acceptability is now totally dependent on those set of criteria we just discussed. So if you look at this now, note this, very important. Now, before you get to answer question number 3, you must have done question number 2. And in question number 2, you look at the strengths and weaknesses of a particular claim. Now, so just describe the strengths and weaknesses of the two people, the first person and the second person argument, and from their strengths and weaknesses, you justify which is more convincing. That is all you need to do to get the 15 marks. Now, since you already know how to answer question on strength and weaknesses, now you have two people, two individual, one, let me call it individual A and individual B, and you have statement about them. So all you need to do is to talk about the strength and the weakness of statement A. So you talk about his strength, you talk about his weakness. Then you come to the second person, you talk about his strength, you talk about his weakness. Then in your conclusion, the person with the highest number of strength, based on your analysis, he should have the most convincing statement. That's it. That's all. That is just it. So now let's look at this. I'm talking about Bridgetta and Davos. Now, taking into consideration, remember I looked at certain statement here, which I call the Rebla. Coming back here, we call them the Rebla. So we now analyzing using Rebla. So here I have this that said, which argument is more convincing between Bridgetta and Davos? Sorry. So now, we're told that Your answer should consider both argument and you should support your point of view with their words. Now, you should consider the strength of their reason and evidence, their use of language, the different types of information used. I also you should talk about their perspective, and you should look at their sources of bias, and you should look at the acceptability of their statement. And remember the word Ribla, please. So you have this at the back of your mind when looking at their statement. And remember I said you should be able to identify their claim or their source of bias from their statement. So if you look at this, we have the two individuals here. So a television debate about globalization. So both of them are talking about globalization. Now, Bridgetta said globalization bring many danger. Now, it does not help us. So this is her claim. So you find out that all her argument will be based on this claim. This is what she's trying to prove. Now, so my father lost his job on a farm when tractors were introduced. So since she has spoken about her father here, lost a job, so you find out that is an evidence, but since she's talking about her father, it is also showing her personal interest. Now, he loved working outside the field. Now he can only get work in a factory. He did not like this change. Now, recently, people have started arriving from overseas. Now, they take our jobs and take over our shop. So she's just talking about, she's looking at majorly local interest. Now, you only hear foreign voices in the street. Schools and hospitals have been overcrowded. They cannot be right. This cannot be right. Migration should be stopped. Now, we will lose our heritage and culture. This is a prediction. Now, and also value, judgment. Now, our way of life is better than other people and must be preserved at all cost. Now, if you look at Bridgetta's statement and you bring in Ribla, first, she gave some evidence, yes. Her reasoning, is it logical? Is her reasoning logical? Is it well structured? Is her reasoning balanced? Did she look at counter argument? She did not. Did she give evidence? Yeah, she stated some evidence, and which perspective is she looking at? She's looking at only personal perspective, and her evidence shows personal perspective, and there is local interest. Here, she made mention of local interest. Now, is her statement biased? It can be biased because her family is involved. Now, what is her use of language? I think her tone is very clear. There is clarity in her tone. Now, globalization should be stopped. There's somewhere she said, migration. Is it migration or globalization? Okay, migration should be stopped. This is it's a strong tone, a strong use of language. It's too exaggerated, like it does not help. That's an exaggerated statement. Globalization brings many danger. So those are the use of language, but her tone is quite clear and it's straightforward. You can understand it. Then the acceptability. How will a lot of people accept this? She does not look at global perspective. She does not look at national perspective. So you should know that the acceptability rate will decrease. Now, but if you look at Davos' statement here, he said, I am sorry, but I do not agree with you. So he starts with a very strong tone here. Start with a very strong tone. Now, globalization and movement of people will bring greater wealth. So his interest is economic interest. He looked at economic interest here. Now, our old jobs were hard and did not pay well. economic. New machines from abroad have increased the number of things we can make and therefore our profit. Now, wages are rising and I can now send money to support my parents. So, you see, he's looking at here, he has looked at his personal values. Now, send money to his parent who do not have pension. So, that is also a local interest. Now, there are many new opportunities for education as the government can afford more schools and universities. This is a national perspective. Now, there may be some cost and change is difficult at times, but globalization, so you see, there may be some cost. He has looked at a counter argument. So he's trying to look at other people's point of view, on this statement. But globalization improve our lives and take us out of poverty. Now, the study by Professor Anya on migrants this year, so he's looking at expert opinions. That's his type of information now, expert opinions. Now, migrant this year shows how they give money to us than they take it. Now, the Open Border Organization supports migration between countries. So this is now, we've looked at, is also talking about, is now moving towards still part of national perspective and also moving towards global perspective. Now, they say that the movement of people bring workers and skills for job that local people cannot do. Now, the World Trade Organization, this is also bringing out global perspective into it now and making mention of international organization as a strength. Now, sharing knowledge and the movement of people between countries. So make sure you state them as you. Now, the International Monetary Fund, another global organization, encourages cooperation between countries. Now, does it mean? So you see a lot of strong points by him. If you bring out the Ribla, so this should be more acceptable based on this criteria, based on the perspective you looked at them from. But another thing is, when you discuss, remember I said you should look at the strengths and weaknesses. It's easy when you bring out the strengths and weaknesses in Bridgetta. Now, but here you might be looking at it. What are the weaknesses? Some of the weakness here, there is no statistics. So I cannot say if it's reliable. Now, both of them didn't give statistics here, no statistics here. Another thing is there is no, I can't tell about the date. They didn't give any date. So that might also reduce the reliability of Davos statement. It might be lying. I don't know. There is no value attached to anything. So there is no statistics. So that's also weaknesses. So that is why I said, when you answer this 15-mark question, you bring out the strength of Davos statement and you bring out the weaknesses of Davos statement. You bring out the strength of Bridgetta's statement and you bring out the weaknesses of Bridgetta's statement. Then you talk about the both of them in your write-up. Then you now write a conclusion. The conclusion will now tell you which is more acceptable based on this set of evidence that is available. Now, you should not be based on your own idea. That is why they say you should use their own words and their language in it. Now, lastly, for this video, I'm looking at a candidate response now on this concept of Bridgetta and Davos statement. So I'll just read through it. That's all I'm doing. I'm reading through it. So as I'm reading through it, please, we'll be able to bring out, it will just help you to see how you can structure yours to get the full mark. Now, he said, this is a high-level response, and I think she scored the full 15 marks, so we can actually learn a whole lot from it. I think that Davos' argument is more convincing. Now, after she has read through it, she has seen how she wants to present it than Bridgetta's. Good. Now, to arrive at this conclusion, I have evaluated both argument based on their strength of reasoning, use of language, and type of information used. Now, Davos' argument is well structured. You see, that's the reasoning now, and has logical flow. reasoning to it. So this is talking about the reasoning. R. Now, he begin with his stance using strong words, so use of language, I'll be putting L, yet in an emphatic tone, so language too. I am sorry, but I do not agree. So from Davos statement extracted from the text. His reasoning is balanced. So balanced reasoning. Reasoning again. So she's looked at one. I'll be writing the R and L where our Ribla comes into place. Reasoning at all levels. So he used the balanced reasoning at all level. He looked at local, national, and global perspective. So you should be able to, in every of their statement, bring them out. Now, look at what she did. This candidate, she came down and she said, the local evidence talk about mechanization, improving wages. The national evidence state fact about education, has enhanced the use of expert testimony. He talked about an expert testimony about the professor. Now, the global evidence is based on international organizations like World Trade Organization and International Monetary Fund, as stated. So you see, these are all evidence and types of information. She has brought in her evidence now. Now, she now said the range and depth of information makes his argument quite sufficient of evidence, allowing it to be trusted. Now, the clear-cut argument at the same time does not provide credible source. So you see, from here now, does not provide credible source. She has now switched to the what? Weakness. After speaking about the strength. Now, no credible source and lack citation, making his evidence unreliable. Remember, there was no statistics. Okay, the evidence also lacks statistical data, which make his evidence quite empty and dry. At the same time, his argument does not mention to which time the evidence apply. To which time the evidence apply. Okay, sorry. To which time the evidence apply, making the reader question its what? Reliability. Did you see? From here now, she spoke about the weakness. After she's done speaking about the strength and weaknesses of Davos, she now came down here and said, Bridgetta's argument, on the other hand, is quite logical. Very important. That's the strength. It's a logical statement as it begins with her stance and stating her opinion. Logical too. Now, the argument also includes evidence to support her argument that revolves around local incidents. She talk about local interest only. She also provides a range of evidence that have been described in depth. So you look at the depth area where we look at types of information, evidence, look at the depth of the evidence and the reliability of the evidence. Now, explaining its causes and consequences, she looked at causes and consequences, obviously, on her father. For example, how her father lost his job after the introduction of machinery for farming. These are strengths. Now, she said her argument include opinion, anecdote, fact about the locality. Remember, types of information, opinion, anecdote, and fact about the locality, and predictions to its effect on their culture. We looked at that too. Prediction. Now, however, you see, when she moved to however, is now the what? She's talking about the weaknesses. However, it lacks statistical data and reliable information. Now, it appears the use of only local example makes her argument appear biased because she's looking at only local interest. Because of her local interest. Furthermore, she has not mentioned her method of research, making her argument unreliable. Against the argument voice, although her use of language is emotive and very exaggerated, yes, and does not very strong and clear. This makes her argument likeliness to be accepted lower than that of Davos. Can you see? Now, that's it. Because she has a lot of weaknesses than that of Davos' statement. Now, to conclude, although Davos' strength of reasoning, use of language, and type of information is strong and reliable and verifiable and more reliable and balanced than Bridgeter. Hence, Davos' strength outweigh his weaknesses. So that's it. Strength and weakness. Davos' strength outweighs weaknesses, making his argument more likely to be accepted than others. You see why I said his strength and weakness? So once you're able to get this concept and write it, this will give you your 15 mark. So please, we need to practice a lot of these past papers. Practice them over and over again and look at it over and over again and make sure you remember all these patterns. Once you do that, you get your 15 marks. So thank you.